Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just was waiting to go live online as well. There's a few people online too. Um, Welcome to this fantastic evening with Vassil. For those who don't know me, my name is Terry Dovey. I'm currently the interim dean of the College of Health, Life, and Medicine here at Brunel, and I am absolutely fantastically and wonderfully delighted to introduce for this brilliant evening for the inaugural lecture of Professor Vassil Girginov. And before I get too in deep into the history of Vassil, I've got a couple of housekeeping notes. The first is we are not expecting a fire alarm. So should we hear the fire alarm sound, please do leave the building and assemble on the adjacent grass area just outside where we usually are in Heinz Wolf. And our stewards today will point the way as we get there. So hopefully we won't be interrupted. In terms of being appointed professor, it's an exceptional achievement, Vassil. And it's only for those who recognise absolutely, truly excel in their field. So I congratulate Vassil on this well-deserved achievement. Well done, sir. After finishing college, Vassil had to choose between a career in music, which I didn't know, or sports management. And he chose, obviously, music. And is now apparent his decision was not sport. And he graduated from the National Sports Academy in Sofia with a major in sport management. Vassil was taught at the National Sports Academy in Sofia, the University of Bedfordshire, the University of Windsor, Canada, before joining us in 2007. That's nearly 19 years ago. Vassil's academic journey could be described as that of an Olympic enthusiast turned organised skeptic, which I'm sure we're going to hear about shortly. And his field of work of sports development, comparative management, and policy analysis, as well as the Olympic movement, has been informed by the historical, cultural, sociological, political, and management perspectives. Vassil currently holds 3 visiting professorships. One, the Stellenbosch University in South Africa, the Capital University of the Physical Education and Sports in Beijing, China, and the Russian International Olympic University. He also serves as the president of the European Association for Sports Management and is currently the general editor of the Routledge Encyclopedia of Sports Studies. Fantastic achievements. His latest books will be coming out this summer. That's the one on management of sports development and the Handbook of Sport and Culture. And will also hopefully be of interest to everyone here today. Now, this Vassil will be starting off a lecture series, and so I'm hoping you'll be able to join us for our other inaugural lectures with should be Paresh Date from maths, as well as Atanas. I did warn Vassil I was going to butcher someone's name this evening. In the next couple of weeks, I believe it's in March. Okay, so I'm hoping that's all the announcements I've got, and all the slides I've got to show you. So hopefully I've whetted your appetite, and Vassil can take us on a wonderful journey that has been his career to date, and hopefully educate us on some interesting areas of the Olympics. Vassil, it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you much. Thank you very much, Terry, for your very kind introduction. And allow me, before I begin, to express my heartfelt thanks to a number of people, beginning, of course, with the family for their support and encouragement. Unfortunately, they couldn't be with us tonight due to sustainability reasons. read, looking after the next generation of Girginovs. Also, I would like to acknowledge the support and encouragement I've received from a number of brilliant academics over the years with whom I had the opportunity to work and to study under. I owe a great deal of respect and thanks to Brunel for being home for nearly 20 years now, and a brilliant bunch of colleagues in soon-to-be sports department, but across Brunel as well. And of course, last but not least, huge thanks to Brunel events team for the brilliant work in putting this event together. When I was offered the opportunity to deliver this talk, my instant reaction was that I'm not going to bore you with how great my research has been, the huge amount of research income generated over the years, or the change, the fundamental change to society that my research has produced. Instead, I wanted to address what I consider to be one of the second most significant, important transformations of sport in our lifetime. The first transformation of modern sport took place in more or less 1981 during the 11th Olympic Congress in Baden-Baden, where the International Olympic Committee formally abandoned the notion of amateurism in sport, which subsequently opened the doors to the rampant commercialism of sport, which interestingly led to the second transformation of sport, which today we talk about. This is the drive for sustainability. So I describe this journey or this transformation, which more or less also shaped and determined my personal development, professional development, as a transformation from the myth of sport, to the current sustainability drive. I spent more than 20 years in formal education, from primary school all the way to PhD, and I studied in 5 different European countries. And I was never ever introduced to sustainability. Sustainability was just not part of the order of the day. Sustainability was not part of the vocabulary of sport organizations either, and more concerningly, it was not necessarily on the radar of sport academics either. So yet, as early as 1907, the founder of the modern Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin, lamented the environmental damage caused by the Games and the major sporting events. He was particularly concerned about the mountains of rubbish left by spectators and visitors alike, and he appealed that we really need to do something. Yet we continue to push along with the way we wanted to develop sport. So hence, as it was hinted in the introduction of this talk, I began my journey, my professional journey, as a real Olympic enthusiast, particularly after my first visit to the International Olympic Academy as a graduate student, which was hugely influential. But gradually over the years, I've turned an Olympic skeptic. And I use the notion of skepticism in the Mertonian sense, that this is a social skepticism is a social norm which we practice according to certain social norms, which I believe most of my academic colleagues subscribe to. So then the question becomes, how did we get here? The current model of sport has evolved over nearly 200 years, but it was in the middle of the 19th century when we started to codify the transformative power of sport. And one of the most influential and well-known novel of that time was Tom Hughes' Tom Brown's School's Day, published in 1957, which depicts the life of a pupil in the famous rugby school. And as you can see from the cover of the book, the main transformative power of sport was depicted as one which actually teaches character, ethics, values, and of course shapes the new leaders of the empire, or the future leaders of the empire. Around the same time, another towering figure, largely forgotten today, that of Dr. Penny William Brooks, initiated the Match Wenlock Olympic Society. Local doctor from the small village of Match Wenlock in Shropshire, hugely influential over the visions of Coubertin to reinvent and revive the Olympic Games. So thanks to this sort of developments, but also the publications of academics and the media, including obviously myself, including in this group, we have established this vision of sport as, and we started to glorify the transformative powers of sport as capable of changing the world. And what has become, in the words of Jay Coakley, the great sport myth. The great sport myth represents the complex relationship between society, sport, and culture. And it's based on three unchangeable beliefs. The first one is that sport is essentially pure and good. And as long as we practice, not only practice, but the goodness and the pureness of sport transfers to those who not only practice it, but also to those who spectate. So you don't have to move out from your chairs. You can just enjoy sport and you will reap the benefits of sport. And by extension, of course, those benefits of sport then transforms into lead to community, individual and community development. And of course, we all know that this is not quite the case. And it was particularly demonstrated by the pioneering work of our late colleague, Professor Celia Brackerinch, in the field of safeguarding of sport. So, excuse me. In our drive to develop sport and shape sport and use the transformative powers of sport, we have established a system, a very complex man-made system. I emphasize this word because we'll come to this word later on in the talk, which is governed by laws which are different from the laws that govern natural systems. And by turning the current model of sport into a human right, by purporting the health benefits of sport into a norm and a relatively cheap policy options to tackle a range of policy issues, have we really set ourselves an impossible target to achieve? Hence the main question of my presentation: is sustainable sport possible? So in the next 30 minutes or so, I will engage with each of the three keywords in the title of this question, and we'll bring them together at the end of the talk. So let's start with the first keyword, sustainability. So what is sustainability? Sustainability is certainly not a new concept. It can be found in the writings of the ancient Greek philosophers, through the greater thinkers of the Renaissance, up until the modern day, the work of Amartya Sen, but also Jeffrey Sachs and many, many others. But probably in its current reincarnation, the concept of sustainability was evoked as an antidote, as a result of the uncontrolled growth of the capitalist model of development. So sustainability was evoked in order to offer an alternative. This was really not possible for us to continue to grow the same model society, so we have to do something differently. Sustainability is also characterized with duality. I mean, because it involves an analytical and a normative concept simultaneously. It offers us an opportunity to understand the world, and at the same time, it provides us with a method of changing the world. So this is an important function of sustainability. More importantly, in my view, is that sustainability represents an attribute to an artifact. Sustainability, in our case, describes an unsustainable sport which interacts with its environment, which exists indefinitely. And it's important to understand that in this relationship always tries to achieve a dynamic equilibrium, where both the artifact, in our case, sport, and the environment interact together, but without detrimental effect. So, and finally, of course, it's important to understand that sustainability concerns artificial or human-made systems, which are different from biological systems, which are inherently stable and sustainable. So in our investigation, particularly our latest project, a EU-funded project, which literally just completed this month, we use one particular conceptualization of sustainability offered by Niels Faber and colleagues. So they consider sustainability as made up of three key properties. The first one is the what is sustainable, which refers to the artifact. What is this what we would like to sustain? We're going to discuss this later on in the talk in some detail. The second property of sustainability is goal orientation, where we can think of sustainability on a continuum, where at the one end we have the absolute orientation to sustainability. In other words, something is either sustainable or it's not sustainable. And at the other end, we have the relative orientation to sustainability, where something is better or worse. And the third property of sustainability, it is relational orientation, or the interaction between the artifact and the environment. So we use this particular conceptualization to inform our research. Sustainability was given political prominence in 2015 through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which were built on the Brundtland's report, Our Common Future, which was published much earlier in 1989. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals represents a network of 17 goals and 231 targets. And it's important to understand that this is not a menu to choose from. This is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals represents a network of goals, and they're organized around four ontologies or dimensions, including the environmental, the social, the economic, and the institutional or the human dimension. And the last one I mentioned, the human or institutional dimension, is the often very forgotten one. But the reality is that no human practice can be sustained without an institution. So this framework now informs the way, or is supposed to inform at least, the way we think about sustainability, because it concerns every sphere of human life, including sport. And the framework envisages that sport should be seen as an enabler of sustainable development goals. The International Olympic Committee was the first one to subscribe to this framework, because now it's a partner to the United Nations. And in 2017, they published their sustainability strategy. And not only that, but the International Olympic Committee also built the most sustainable building in the world, the Olympic House, which is the headquarters of the IOC, based on the Geneva Lake shorelines. In Lausanne, I had the opportunity to visit this building several times, and it really is a phenomenal building. There is no such building in the world. This is the standard, has been given the Platinum 4.1 award by all environmental organizations. This is the standard of building that we need to look at for the rest of the century. And of course, it comes with a price tag of $500 million, which of course IOC was only able to generate because of the first transformation of sport I mentioned in 1981, which allowed IOC to generate the resources that they needed to develop sport. But it's not only about the building, it's about the IOC and the Olympic movement commitment to sustainable development goals. And the IOC only subscribes to 11 of the 17 goals. More concerning for me is the fact that they shy away from the first goal, which is no hunger, and goal number 10, eliminating inequality or reducing inequality. And these two are absolutely fundamental. They represent the structural elements that determine people's ability to engage in sport and to enjoy the benefits of sport. And if we don't address them, then we have a serious problem. Interestingly enough, if you look at the current Sport England strategy, a sports strategy which is called Uniting the Movement, eradicating or tackling inequality is at the heart of the strategy. So we clearly have a major disconnect between, for example, the interpretation of sustainability by the major international sport organization, and for example, how sustainability is being interpreted by an organization in this country. The same is true for World Athletics, which is another major sport on the Olympic program. In reality, they also have a very sophisticated and advanced sustainability strategy, 10-year long strategy, which was published in 2022. And in 23, I was invited to deliver a keynote to their global running conference. And this is the banner they usually use for various events. And as you can see, World Athletics only subscribed to 13 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And when I asked them, and I said, but why don't you try to tackle every single goal on the sustainability agenda? They simply say, oh, because they're not relevant for us, which of course I tend to disagree with. But this is the reality. Now, so much so about the first keyword in the main question of this talk. Now, how do we establish what is possible or not possible? In order to answer this part of the question, I borrow from Kenneth Arrow's possibility or the impossibility theorem. Kenneth Arrow is an American economist, and he developed this theory first as part of his PhD in 1956, and nearly 20 years later, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics for his possibility or impossibility theorem. Essentially, this is a social choice theory, and it tries to answer the basic question of collective decision making. Arrow was interested whether there are certain rules or norms or procedures to be able to help us to determine how people order their choices. He conducted developed his theorem in the context of voting. So he was interested to understand what is the best voting procedure which can help us really rank our choices while acknowledging and respecting people's autonomy and the rationality of their choices. So he proposed 4 properties or axioms that we must satisfy in order to make those decisions. So the first, and all of these properties and axioms, as you will see, are very desirable, they're very reasonable, but collectively they lead to an impossibility. The first one is decisive. That decision must be decisive. In other words, we must have a clear winner. Voting process must declare a clear winner. The second is that the decision must be consensus based. In other words, the majority. We need to respect the majority decision. The third property is non-dictatorships. In other words, no party should have the power to impose its will on the rest of the participants. And finally, independence of relevant alternatives entails that if we were to add or drop a candidate from the list, this should not affect the outcome of the consensus-based decision. So we're going to use this framework later on in the presentation and examine to what extent this will be possible for sport. But essentially, the key point here, which I would like to emphasize, is that sustainable sport is a public choice issue. Sport organizations always have to choose between a range of policy alternatives. For example, how to set up their strategic priorities, their investments, the number of competitions they organize, and so on. So sustainability is not the only option they have available. This is why I think it's possible to apply this theory, which has been, by the way, applied and used in welfare economics and health extensively, but certainly not in sport. Now, let's have a look at the nature of the sustainability challenge. And how many of you actually play tennis or at least watch tennis or interested? Oh, quite a few people. Fantastic. I also tend to play recreationally, but certainly don't play many. Any skills. Do you happen to know what is the average lifespan of a tennis ball? Have you ever asked yourself, how long does a tennis ball last? You're very close. 6 hours. Yeah, 6 hours. But do you happen to know how long does it take for a tennis ball to decompose? Yeah. Wow. You like to exaggerate, but you're not that far off. It takes 400 years for a tennis ball to decompose. In fairness, we have to say that now we have the technology which allows us to separate the felt from the rubber, so we can recycle tennis balls, but this technology is in its infancy. Now, a couple of figures. 125 is 125 million tennis balls, which tennis players in the United States send to a landfill each year. And we here also make our fair contribution. This is the 50,000 balls is the contribution which Wimbledon makes to the environmental damage, if you'd like. In fairness, I have to say Wimbledon have a very advanced strategy for environmental strategy. The same applies for Lawn Tennis Association. We work with these organizations. They also have a very advanced and sophisticated sustainability strategy with clear responsibilities, KPIs and targets, and their strategy is monitored in real time. But the key point here is that, I mean, look at this. We may be critical about the Wimbledon as an event in terms of the environmental regulation which the event contributes to, but this 2 weeks event generates each year between 40 and 50 million pounds. And those 40 or 50 million pounds represent 90% of the income of tennis in this country. Without this single event, there won't be tennis development in the UK. So the main concern of tennis and its relationship as an artifact and its relationship with the environment is this: how to keep this balance, this equilibrium, not to damage the environment. And by the way, there is a whole furnishing industry emerging now, which they started to make tables, benches, and chairs out of tennis balls. In case you're interested, you can certainly find one. Well, the relationship of other sports with the environment is slightly different. As part of our study, we also engage with the British Mountaineering Council and the Paddle UK, two sports which the participation in those sports is predicated on access to land and water, respectively. And both sports are on the Olympic program. British Mountaineering Council is in charge of rock climbing, and obviously Paddle UK, formerly canoeing, British Canoeing, is in charge of canoeing and kayaking. Only 8% of the land mass in this country is available to ramblers to roam freely. And the situation with paddle is even worse. Less than 4% of the more than 42,000 miles of inland waterways are accessible for paddlers and contested. So both organizations are part of a consortium of about 40 plus organizations in this country, and they've been lobbying the government very actively to allow access to, obviously, land and water, so participants can engage with nature and they can take care of nature. So as you can see, different sports have different relationships with the environment, and they have to strike a very fine balance between developing their sport and at the same time taking care of the environment. A couple of more slides from our current project. This project involves 6 countries, 5 European countries plus United States. In total, we studied 13 different national governing bodies of sport, including World Athletics and the International Match Poker Federation, which is an e-sport. What you see on the slides are the examples of the athletic federations in Belgium and Finland, the sailing federations of France and the United States, the Equestrian Federation of Sweden, and the British Mountaineering Council. And as you can see, they all have strategies or initiatives, sustainable strategies, initiatives, but they tend to interpret sustainability very differently. And only 4 of the 6 NGBs on this slide actually engage with Sustainable Development Goal 10. No sport organization engages or addresses Sustainable Development Goal 1, and no organizations engages with more than 7 Sustainable Development Goals out of 17. Similar picture with the sport of football, data from Common Goal. a consortium of 192 organizations. And as you can see, that, they connect football, they try to connect football with sustainability, and mostly they're interested in the health and well-being benefits, which engagement, people who play football can benefit from, education, partly gender, and inequality. But as you go down the list, gradually, virtually no concern about poverty, and certainly no concern about the life below water or life on land, which are the main concerns of the two governing bodies I just mentioned previously. So again, we have very different interpretation and engagement, and which of course determines the equilibrium between the artifact, the sport, and the environment. Underpinning all of this is what I call the three M's. The insatiable drive and strive to have more members. We all aspire to have more members. Obviously, some of the participants on this slide may be disqualified for not running in their own lane. All sport organizations aspire to have more members, more participants. They aspire to win more medals, or for their athletes to excel and to be successful, to win games, and of course, more money. Without funding, sport organizations will not be able to survive. And this is particularly true for national governing body sports in this country. Around 63% of the funding of NGBs in this country comes from governmental grants and national lottery money. The government latest strategy, physical activity and sports strategy, Get Active, which was published in the autumn of 23, also places the emphasis on more people playing sport. They would like to see by 2030, the government would like to see 1 million more adults participating in sport and 2.5 million children participating in sport. So the current model of sport, the driving force behind the current model of sport is this insatiable drive for growth. We try to grow sport all the time, different aspects of growth. And the government current strategy only, actually, it prioritizes sustainability, but only the environmental dimension of sustainability. And we don't know to what extent, for example, the current Labour government is going to honor the commitments which the previous, because the strategy was published by the previous Conservative government. So there is a problem with this, because I'm sure you'll be aware, there is a difference between growth and development. When something grows, it increases in size, it becomes bigger. And growth typically refers to an external process. Growth is always limited. Development refers to an internal process. It's ongoing. When something develops, it becomes different. So we really need to decide what kind of sport we would like to develop, to continue to grow. And there is an irreducible physical dimension to sport, which cannot get away from. There are two main resources or capitals available: natural in the form of land, air, water, light, and of course artificial in the form of facilities, equipment. Sport uses both resources or capitals, natural and artificial, but it only produces artificial capital. Sport doesn't produce natural capital. And the irony of this is that we have known this for quite some time. The distinction between growth and development was very well documented and established in various fields, particularly in economics, through the works of Meadows and many others. But Herman Daly famously put it that sustainable growth of the world economy is a bad oxymoron. There is no such thing. You cannot really. And this conclusion applies to sport as well. It is not really possible for sport to grow its way out of more of the same sport and environmental degradation. It's just not possible. We need to think of a different model of sport. So now let's put together the three concepts of sustainability, possibility, and sport, and the challenges to sport. So what we have is that in order to have a sustainable sport, it must be decisive. In other words, the goal orientation of sustainability, we need to be very clear whether we would like to have an absolute orientation to sustainability. And in fact, more than 400 organizations, sport organizations, have now become signatories to the United Nations Climate Action Framework, and they have committed to become carbon neutral by 2030. And many of them are well on course of achieving that, including obviously the IOC with their phenomenal building. But with regards to the other aspects of sport, it's more about the relative orientation towards sustainability. Consensus-based, we really need to decide what is this we would like to sustain. Is it the number of players? Is it the number of competitions, the number of facilities, the resources, the number of clubs or members? And this is where differences started to appear, because different stakeholders have different ideas as to what is this they would like to sustain. And this is why it becomes very challenging to arrive at a consensus view. Non-dictatorship implies that no stakeholders should be able to decide what to sustain in sport. But as I mentioned already, the government has put forward or actually promised to make the environmental requirement a condition for public funding. In other words, we may reasonably expect that at least in this country, in foreseeable future, sport organizations will be expected to meet certain environmental standards in order to qualify for public funding. And finally, the independence of irrelevant alternatives implies that if we were to add or drop certain views about sustainability or what aspects of sport should be sustainable, this shouldn't really affect the outcome of the consensus-based view or decision on sustainability. In concluding, I would like to offer a look into the future. And as I mentioned, we have made some progress towards the sustainability imperative. An example of this is the Paris Summit of Sport for Sustainable Development, which was organized just before the Olympic Games last year in Paris and jointly hosted by the IOC and UNESCO. Although there were some disagreements here, but nonetheless, this was a big forum promoting sustainability and the relationship of sustainability with sport. Another very important event is the Sport Positive Summit. This is the largest gathering of sports stakeholders in the world concerned with sustainability, environment, biodiversity, and each year they gather here in London, to discuss this relationship between sport and sustainability. In 2023, the main question addressed by the summit was, can the growth of sport ever be compatible with the environmental sustainability commitments? And the event is typically attended by 1,000+ people, as I mentioned, people from the sport industry, academics, event organizers. And the event organizers polled participants before the debate. And as you can see, 53% of them were of the view that it's not really possible to, or would be very difficult to reconcile the requirements of sustainable development and the growth of sport. But more interestingly, see what happened after the debate. The organizers also polled the participants after the debate. As you can see, the group of the organized skeptics has grown in size. 73% of the people who attended the event were the view that it really is going to be very challenging. So to conclude, I see the main challenges facing sustainability of sport in the form of these two questions. The first one is how to reconcile the ideology of growth with the sustainable sport development imperative, which certainly is going to dominate the future of sport as we know it. And secondly, how to satisfy a range of contradictory but otherwise very reasonable conditions, the four conditions which I mentioned. For that to happen, we certainly need to change how we teach, research, practice, and manage sport. And to show you that we try to practice what we preach, Brunel is pioneering with a number of 3 other academic partners and industry partners, pioneering a very innovative graduate program in sustainable sport management, which we hope to be able to launch in 2026. On that note, thank you very much for your attention.
Vassil, what is was a very interesting talk. Do we have any questions for Vassil before I totally abuse my position of Vassil? Go for it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Very interesting. You could say that in Europe, but generally speaking in the Western, what we call the Western Hemisphere, because of the economy, I think people's mental health and mental attitude of things is becoming a lot more negative because of the way the economy is going. What do you see the impact will be on the ability of us to achieve sustainability? Because, like any business, when it starts to get into a difficult situation, in some ways, they look at the money aspect and they sort of forget about things like environment and stuff like that and the effects that they have. They're looking at like continuing. Is there much influence on that?
Well, thank you for your question. I mean, certainly, as I mentioned, resources are critical for sport organizations to be able, because sustainability is a very demanding concept. And imagine even in the United States, where the sport organizations, most of them are well resourced, but not necessarily. So, for example, two of the national sport federations in the United States of badminton and triathlon, for example, they don't have a full-time employee. These are Olympic sports on the Olympic program. So it will be very hard to talk to them about sustainability. You can certainly talk to US athletics and hockey and other federations which have the resources and have already committed to do something. But the reality is that we all can do something. The problem with sustainability is that it doesn't transpire at individual level. Sustainability can be interpreted at individual, organizational, and societal or systemic level. Sustainability always transpires at systemic level. So establishing this connection is going to be extremely challenging, but resources are absolutely critical. You're right.
Thank you for such an erudite exposition. My question follows on from the previous one. Your presentation got me thinking about large multi-sports events and sustainability. I'm sure you're very well aware that Montreal has only very recently finished paying off the Olympics of 1976. There has been reluctance to host Commonwealth Games, and there have been issues with recent soccer tournaments also, and abuse of human rights and so on. So my question really concerns the dichotomy of sustainability versus the financial implications of an event, and how that goes into the decision-making process of cities that consider hosting these major multi-sport events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kostas. The sustainability of major sporting events now is not a negotiable topic. You must comply. And by the way, London Olympics were the first one to establish the international standard for sustainable events, the ISO 2021, I believe, Mike. It was, which since has developed a lot, and it's just non-negotiable. So you must deliver your event. The Olympic Games in particular must be sustainable in every respect. And the IEC are putting the resources to support the organizing committee to do that. Many other international sport federations also try to achieve that. World Athletics, for example, their well depends on the number, more or less, not only, but depends heavily on the number of running events they license. So they license more than 400 events globally, and each event brings in income. So, for example, the London Marathon, to be able to show affiliation with World Athletics, they have to pay £50,000 to the World Athletics, and so on. From 2026, it will become a condition. If you were to host or to have an event recognized by the World Athletics, you must comply with their sustainability standards. Achieving sustainability for events is not that challenging because you are in control. You control more or less everything which is related to the event. There is very little you can do about the travel, because transport is the main contributor to carbon emissions and all this. But for example, many athletes started to use train or even walk, if you like, or cycle to go to Olympic Games in particular. But of course, that will be unthinkable, to expect people to cross oceans and all the rest in order to get to an event. The point is that, again, it is possible to continue to generate income from events by meeting the highest possible environmental standards. And this is something which event organizers and the owners of the event have been trying to achieve throughout the whole supply chain. It's not just the organizing committee or the headquarters. The whole supply chain must comply, otherwise you won't be given a contract. And the IOC has already achieved that with Paris in particular. Everything which concerning the organization of the games in Paris was absolutely sustainable, apart from the weather, of course, which spoiled opening ceremony.
Vassil, thank you very much. It was really interesting. I was just really pondering the Sustainable Development Goals piece you were talking about. Certainly our research supports what you showed there, that a lot of sports organizations are not really focused on all the SDGs. I gave a presentation at the UCI conference. I asked about 100 delegates how many of them could remember what the SDGs were, and very few could remember 2 or 3 of them. So do you think that sport's really lacking a good framework? Do you think SDGs is a good framework for sport? Do you think it captures what sport is doing and achieving? How does it relate to this value that sport has the power to change the world and perhaps communicate with its fan base? We know there's 4 to 5 billion sports fans, 4 to 5 billion sports fans around the world. How can it use its platform for good? Can it use its platform for good? So does sport have the right way to express sustainability and define it? And do you think that actually the SDGs are the best way to do it?
Thank you very much, Mike. By the way, Mike is the CEO of the Global Sustainable Sport, a major platform. He's a champion and pioneer of sustainability. We can be very critical about the United Nations Sustainable Development Framework, because if we start unpacking this framework, we'll see a lot of flaws and questionable propositions. Nonetheless, it provides a commonly agreed framework. But sustainability, as I mentioned, represents a relationship. And there are different ontologies that we can use to explain sustainability. And it's we cannot separate sustainability from the viewpoint of those who interpret it. And this is where we start seeing the relative interpretations of sustainability. But it's better to have this framework. Actually, if you look at the International Olympic Committee framework, it has been designed only to tackle sustainability from the point of view of the organization, okay? Because there are 3 layers or levels of how they interpret sustainability. First of all, IOC is an organization, then the games, where they have control over, and this more or less they have secured these 2. But as they move on to the wide Olympic movement, they have no control and even no interest in engaging. But as I mentioned, it's conditional now. If you were to host Olympic Games, you must be compliant with all the sustainability requirements. Same with World Athletics. World Athletics sustainability strategy mirrors 100% the IOC sustainability strategy. But it's better to have something, a framework, which is more or less well understood and promoted, rather than not really having a direction of travel, if you like.
Yeah, thank you for taking another question. A business, it goes through a cycle, and sport, I think, went through a really good one when TV was invented and everybody could see it and then get involved and take part in it. Today, isn't the world becoming less healthy? Isn't the world moving to a digital type of entertainment? And as I said before, the mental health of the West has it not gone past its peak, and therefore the effect of sustainability, like getting people to take interest, is just like your colleague said here, coming downhill? Really, how can that be tackled and changed?
Well, thank you again for your question. Where do I start? As I mentioned, we never stop to aspire to encourage more people to become physically active, because the benefits of physical activity are well documented. Okay, there is no question about that. The question then becomes, to what extent is it possible to really engage every single segment of society? So the latest Sport England data, for example, show that 52% of children, young people in this country, don't meet the requirements for being physically active, which means for 60 minutes of moderate to intense physical activity a week. So they just don't meet those requirements. The adult number is much less. The situation across the world is pretty much similar. In some countries worse, is better. And individual countries have their own approaches to addressing this particular problem. Mental health is not necessarily an issue in many countries, but certainly a major factor in the Western world. And each of these factors represents different challenges. I just read literally today that now we have another look at obesity. So obesity is not necessarily the way we used to interpret obesity. So it needs to be looked in the context of the wider picture, social and economic and other factors. So our understanding of what constitutes, for example, physical activity, or the relationship between sport and health, also evolves over time. So I don't know, it's a challenging one to tackle.
Thank you, Vassil. I'm Huadong from Brunel Design School. I have two short questions. One is, can you comment on the London Olympics sustainability events strategy? What is impact on sports sustainability? The second, can you comment on esports in comparison to physical sports in terms of sustainability?
Thank you very much, and thank you for all your support as well and contribution to the collection of the two volumes on the London Games. The first question, as I mentioned, London was the first Olympic Games event organizer, which established the sustainable event standards, which were then accepted by the International Organization of, I'm not sure exactly, I can't remember exactly the name of the body, doesn't really matter, which since has become the standard for sustainability events. Okay, so we already have this standard in place, which was established by London, and it was the first organizing committee to be certified. They went through the process of certification, and they were certified as being compliant with the standard. Has evolved since then, of course, and was expanded and improved on. With regards to the second question, the sustainability and the relationship between esports and sustainability and physical activity, most of the research suggests that, yes, indeed, people who play esports, they spend extensive number of hours, between 8 and 10 hours in front of a screen and computer. But particularly those who are advanced, similar to people who play sports and advance in their careers. And if you look now at the training regime of those people, it's very similar to the training regime of the regular athletes. They have breaks, they have physical training, they have mental support. But of course, this is now only available for the players which are the highest level. For the majority of esport players, this really is a challenge. But I'm sure that IOC already started to court esports, and it's perfectly possible that they organized the first big event already in Singapore with esports events. So it's perfectly possible that they'll try to incorporate esports into the Olympic movement and family, which will certainly have an impact on the way it's organized and practiced.
Thank you very much.
My question really is, looking at what Greta Thunberg did when she went to the US, because she didn't cover by air, she went by boat, whether or not the government will support people or the athletes to go to different countries rather than going by plane. I don't know whether that's something that's not going to come up. But if you talk about sustainability, how do you measure that?
Well, thank you for your question. There are plenty of my colleagues here in the room who work with elite athletes, and I'm sure this will be anathema for this sort of consideration will be anathema to them. No coach would allow their athlete to travel for 10 days to get to a competition, particularly if it's a medal contender. And you only have to look at the name of the UK elite sport policy. It's called no compromise. Okay, so and the opening line of the policy tells you that we don't reward mediocrity. Okay, so it will be very difficult to sustain your funding as an elite athlete if you decided to walk all the way to the next major competition and not compromise your chances to win a medal. Because according to this policy, the public funding for elite sport is not a God-given privilege. It's not a God-given right. It's a privilege. You have to earn it.
Question over here.
I'm from the sport of rowing. Do you have a view about whether the world rowing or British rowing are really taking this on board?
Absolutely. Rowing is one of the sports which actively interacts with the environment and obviously water. And there has been a very strong push, both from Sport England and UK Sport, to encourage sports governing bodies to become more sustainable in this regard. They also have their own sustainability views and initiatives. The reality is that a national governing body of sport may not necessarily have a document called sustainability strategy, but they will have in place a number of initiatives designed to, for example, to cut down on transport, on carbon emissions, on various aspects. So absolutely, all NGBs, and particularly, as I mentioned, given the government current policy plans get active, there is a very strong emphasis on the environmental dimension of sustainability. So sport organizations need to line up.
And I just had a quick look at the website, and what I'd like to see are toolkits for clubs and for people who run events, so that they can look at how they're being sustainable. I don't see that.
You won't really find it, even in the Lawn Tennis Association, as I mentioned, they have one of the most advanced strategy. You won't really find a toolkit, but they run similar to rowing, British rowing. They run a number of workshops and educational seminars to educate coaches and volunteers and their members about the importance of sustainability. So they do that. They do a lot of educational work.
I have a couple of questions as well, Vassil, if that's okay. So I'm heavily involved in community cricket, and some of the stuff you've been saying there around mass participation versus development chimes a lot in terms of how the system is set up. But my first question relates more to the myth around the community development that you highlighted. And the current sort of modern sports iteration towards technological, towards heavy training regimes with key goals for developing a particular skill and strategy solutions in games. How does that marry with that community development element and mass participation? Doesn't seem sustainable.
Well, this is part of the. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your question. In my view, this is part of the notion of the sport pyramid, if you look at any sport artist development model, and there are quite a few of them out there, or sports development models, you will see that there is always a clear pathway for progression. So for those who would like to play recreationally, just have fun, and not necessarily be part of a organized community of sport. And by the way, running is a great example in this regard. In fairness, I don't really know much about the specifics of cricket, but running is a great example. And the park run, this global initiative now, where you can simply turn up on Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, in designated areas and enjoy the camaraderie and the company of other runners. No pressure, no competition, nothing at all. So, but in any model of community or sport development, you will see that there will be a pathway, an opportunity for people to excel. And this is where, because inevitably some people will have will be more gifted or have the inclination to be involved and to excel. So I don't see necessarily a contradiction here. And as part of sustainability, we have this notion of social justice, which is absolutely critical. And social justice is precisely about that, not just to offer people the opportunities to participate, but to make this possible through funding to various initiatives. And there are plenty of examples in this regard. So these two levels of sports are interconnected. They feed on each other. You need to have the elite end, which provides the razzmatazz, if you like, and the involvement of sponsors and stakeholders, and which was, as I mentioned, largely responsible for generating the wealth for sport. But as with other areas, over time has become excessive, and we started losing sight of the true values that underpin the involvement in sport. Well, I guess there was a second part to your question. Sorry, I forgot.
Yes, the sustainable element, certainly with technological solutions.
Oh,
That just to give an indication, I would love to have a club-related solution because we get through 1,000 cricket balls for every age range in just our club. There's a shed of shame where it's full of old cricket gear.
The technology certainly started to offer solutions, but again, it's down to the international and national governing bodies as well to be a bit more flexible and open to those changes, and to make sure that they will introduce those changes more rapidly. If you take, for example, biathlon and other sports, they've already introduced the lasers, so they're not using bullets to shoot the targets and all the rest. So there have been a number of technological developments in different sports that will make sport more environmentally friendly. Let's put it this way. I'm not sure whether it will be purely sustainable, but the reality is that sustainability is not a fixed goal. It's not fixed in stone. It's a moving target, and it will always remain relative. Sustainability will always remain relative. So we will always aspire to become more and more and more sustainable, and technology will certainly help us meet some of those challenges, in my view.
And I have one other question,
Sure.
If that's okay, that will hopefully I can use your music background as well, because music has become a relic somewhat of.
We have an expert in the room.
We do. So music very much has become a relic, especially orchestral music of the elite. And I wonder, with all the sports facilities becoming increasingly difficult to access, more environmental space and needed, how is sport going to develop sustainably? Especially, I mean, one of the good ones is golf. Just recently, we saw the release of the first indoor golf, where they're hitting it against a screen rather than having to use up the whole space. Is that a solution for the future? I mean, how do you feel sport will develop sustainably over the next 20 years?
Thanks again. It's a challenging one, but we have examples to that end. And very good examples. So, for example, there is a big company, multinational company called the O Group, which is based in the United States. And they have established in Cleveland the most sustainable indoor venue in the world. It really is truly sustainable, where you can practice all sorts of sports indoor and more or less get the similar, I wouldn't say the same, but similar excitement and thrill out of this. The reality is that all these technological advancements, they also require resources. Okay, they also require resources, and those resources are natural. They come from water, they come from air, and we need to exploit. And electricity. I mean, how do we generate electricity? To, for example, to sustain esports, and they consume huge amount of electricity just to use the internet and the games and all the rest. Again, a very challenging one. I wish I had the exact answer to this question. But yeah, to solve it. Yeah.
He had 3 questions, so I was taking 3 as well. In this goal of sustainability, has AI shown its appearance yet? And what impact do you think that AI could have in allowing sport to achieve its goal of sustainability?
Ooh, that's a very tough one. I can understand you kept the toughest one for last. I understand I don't quite understand what AI is about, but I subscribe to Noam Chomsky's view of AI, who called it a software plagiarism. I wouldn't want to go into a debate about this, but I personally I'm not aware of any significant advancements in using AI in sport apart from the collection of insights. Many national governing bodies of sport, particularly in this country, have already established insights units or departments within the organization, the sole purpose of which, including the street games, by the way, the sole purpose of which is to generate insights, better understand the customer, better understand the relationship between sport and the environment and all the rest. From this point of view, yes, we have already seen examples of the use of AI. To what extent AI will be able to move us towards greater sustainability, to be honest, I can only speculate.
Thank you ever so much, Vassil. I think we're out of time now.
Thank you.
What a
Thank you.
There are, please